Most physicians will tell you what your numbers mean. Dr. Ari Levy will tell you what your life means first. In this episode of The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur, I sit down with Dr. Ari Levy, founder of Shift Medical, former Chicago Blackhawks team physician, and one of the most relentlessly human doctors I've ever met, to explore what happens when you build a medical practice around love and care instead of transactions and throughput. In this conversation, you'll learn what it looks like when a physician refuses to separate the content of your health from the context of your life, and why that distinction changes everything. I'm Jonathan Domsky. This is The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur. Let's go. Some entrepreneurs succeed by following the playbook, and some succeed by writing their own. This show is for the second kind. Welcome to The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur, conversations with intense, analytical founders who have built something significant and are now redesigning the architecture of how they lead, build, and operate so that their strengths create leverage instead of friction. I'm your host, Jonathan Domsky, business and life coach, entrepreneur, and someone who has spent a career helping powerful minds build businesses that actually fit how they think. Let's get started. All right, let's hear your story. When did you first realize that you think differently than most people in the room?
I don't really know the answer to that question. I have some memories that I can tell you, probably solidified my understanding as an entrepreneur. And the first one was sitting in Theories of Leadership with Marvin Zonis. It was my first MBA class. And when I sat in there, I just started hearing all about these different entrepreneurs and who they were and what they were doing. And I felt flooded at the time. And that was one of the four classes I was taking. The other one was building a new venture with Professor Waverly Deutsch. And she was listing out the character traits of typical entrepreneurs. And I felt, the hairs on my forearm, stand up. It was just a moment in time. So that was, I guess, my early mid.
Yeah. You say that it was during your MBA program, which was concurrent with you getting an MD. I think most people would think that was unusual. When do you think the people around you realized that you think differently than most people in the room?
Well, I think everybody understood that about me from the earliest of ages. So those who knew me closely, and even those probably from afar, knew that I thought a bit differently, was fiercely independent, and was willing to ask the next question.
Yeah, sometimes those things are things that seem obvious to other people are sometimes hidden from us. All right, tell me about your genius. What are things that you seemingly effortlessly do better than almost everyone you know?
It's a really uncomfortable question. I don't
Let's
know
actually
if
start
I.
with that. Let's start with that. What's uncomfortable about that? I mean, I certainly see your genius. What's uncomfortable about speaking about it, recognizing it in yourself?
I think I have a psychology about arrogance and what that might mean and how that comes off. So how you hold your genius and your strengths and not allow those also to become your weaknesses, or recognize both sides to that sword, right? I talk about how the sword cuts both ways. So I think some of my greatest insecurities led to some of my greatest gifts that I'm observing today, which was to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel understood, to watch people around me when I was younger not necessarily be understood. The content and the context of their messages were often misaligned. And so for me, I spent a lot of time understanding the interaction between two people and trying to pick up on the cues, not just in the verbal and linguistic language, right? But the facial expressions, the body language, the movement, what might be subconscious or unconscious that somebody's doing, right? An asymmetric smile, or, when a question gets asked, the crossing of arms and legs, those are some of the obvious ones. And I think that that led to me really being inquisitive and seeking to understand who a person is that's sitting across from me. And today, I think that's one of my gifts, is that I can understand a human being, who they are, where they're at, and what they need, not just based on what they're verbally communicating, but based on what I'm observing and patterns that I feel like I've seen in the past.
You and I have known each other for, what, 15 years now? And you certainly have many gifts. But when I think of you and I think about your genius, and I'm going to use that word whether you're comfortable with it or not, is Right, more than anyone I know. Just you were born for a storm. And not just to act clinically and decisively, although you're certainly capable of that, but with great heart and compassion. And I know that anytime something's going on in my life, you are someone I always depend on, totally unprompted, to check in on me and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And if that's not genius, I don't know what is. Um, I'm really
Thank,
curious, though.
thank, thank you, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, absorb that for a minute. I'm really curious about this discomfort, and you are far from alone. But I'm very curious about the discomfort about owning. Owning's not actually. I think you do own your genius, but the comfort with saying it out loud. And you talked about arrogance. All right, what's something that you think that people misunderstand about you?
My aggressive nature, my willingness to constantly push, to be maybe misaligned with at times, like, why am I pushing so hard, or why am I going after something, or whatever it might be. Where does that originate, and how is that, how, when can that be too much, right? Zone of genius means it's a zone of genius, right? And so you can skew one way or the other. And so for me, you're right. I do believe in the gifts that I have and the imperfections. And they, when done right, allow me to show up in a way that feels like life is in full living color, right? It's very vibrant, it's very engaging. Of course, it's in flow, but it's also like, oh, yeah, this is what I was meant to do, right? This is
Yeah.
highest and best work.
Hey, this gift of real intensity, which leads to a life of full engagement, and it also leads to some friction. Where do you feel that intensity serves you and has helped you succeed? And where are times when that intensity has caused trouble for yourself and those around you?
I think for me, it is all about preparation and awareness. In the moments when I fail to identify where I'm afraid, or I'm feeling anxious, or I am just tired and fatigued, the lens that I have in those scenarios brings a greater level of friction slash urgency slash impatience slash heightened emotion, which all are basically, the content is the same, right? Of whatever the topic is at hand, but the um, delivery is off, right? For me, I shouldn't say right. The delivery is off for me, and so that can lead to me kind of pushing, right? And for any athlete, for any person that ever knows their zone of genius, it is all about the preparation so that you can be here now. And that is like the entire being of yourself.
What are your special interests? Things that you just love and know more about than most of the people that you know?
I love tennis. So I'm
Very
a
cool.
total geek about that. That is it's a rekindled passion of mine. So I know a lot about that, or I think I know a lot about that. I'm a total geek about the human experience, and Jonathan, I forget the term that you have for us, but we're like personal growth
Personal growth
athletes.
athletes, you and I. Yeah.
athletes. I'm aspiring to be a Hall of Famer in that way, less about personal self help, but I love the idea of understanding human being, how the mind thinks, how the body works with it, just how to be quite honest, find this place of equanimity where, to be able to sit in a storm, right? As you so kindly gave me that, means that I also have to be super aware of myself as a conduit in the storm, helping others. So I've got to understand that. And so for me, that reflection has been so much fun.
Yeah, that balance between being the hurricane and being the eye.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think you're more than anyone I know, I think you really excel at both. Like there's times when like you're the hurricane, you're making stuff happen, you're blowing down trees. And then there's other times where all this chaos is going on around you and you're the stillness in that. It's a rare gift. Let's put that one in the genius category too.
I'm just gonna pause for a second. That takes me back to some early childhood memories where I think I always wanted to be the rock for people. It was something I just wanted to be able to be there for people when it mattered most, because that mattered to me. And to hear that feels very life affirming, at least through these first 47 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I just
Thank
want to
you.
say right now, I find this tension fascinating that at the same time, you have these real gifts that, like you said, maybe you only noticed it in your 20s, but everyone around you knew it, for the time that you were
Mhm.
small. And you've accomplished so much and you've dedicated your life to service and you're helping so many people, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But then also this discomfort with being seen as something other than you really are, and how sometimes that intensity comes across is misinterpreted by others as the opposite of this grounded, loving, compassionate person who really does strive to be present with people. And sometimes it comes across as the opposite. It's a fascinating tensionary.
I just I think, for me, there's a couple of things. One, I mean, it absolutely connects to, we can talk about daddy or entrepreneurs and their daddy issues. It comes across for me having seen my father, who's an amazing man, an incredibly gifted man, and like everybody else, a very flawed man. He's been a mentor and a role model, and you know, a person I love dearly. And I watched him be incredibly successful in raising us and being a father and being an immigrant who read and wrote at to this day, probably somewhere in the third to fifth grade level, but man, is he capable. That being said, I remember, seeing or observing different situations that made me feel embarrassed, that made me feel understood. And he handled it okay, but I just watched some of that. And so, I think there's that aspect of it. And then I think the truly greats, the historic greats, and I wouldn't say try to emulate them, but learn from what they've done. It is I mean, it's like, this is just what I do, right? And, I appreciate that, but I'm not seeking to be somebody in this world that is uh, recognized publicly by followers or viewers or whatever for that greatness. I just want to give and help people in scalable ways.
Yeah. I want to talk more about this, what shaped you. You talked about your Israeli immigrant father and how he had his gifts and he had his rough edges and hardness as well. You've talked about having just a long, hard childhood illness during your formative years. And most people would carry these things as defining wounds. But for you, it seems like a lens. When did these experiences stop being something that happened to you and start being something that just shaped how you see the world?
Well, I don't think it's ever done. I think it's, in this chapter, I've come to understand that. I think it's also part of our social and psychological development. In my early 40s, I began meaningfully investing in personal therapy to understand more about myself and what I call blind spots. It wasn't as though there was a capital A anxiety or a capital D depression or panic attacks. There was none of that. It was just, you know, Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there. And it's part of I'm a curious explorer. So for me, it was just unpacking all of these things and starting to see them through different lenses. And, what I realized that I needed and what I've known that I've needed, but it was reinforced there, is I selfishly like one-on-one attention focused on this. I want to go deep. I want to get into it. I want to explore it. I want to understand it. And then I need to work it out from there, and then, set down sort of new bricks of what the memories mean.
Yeah. Tell me about your business. What do you do? Who do you serve? What are the problems that you solve?
My business. I'm in the business of caring for people. I'm a physician and entrepreneur. I built and run Shift Medical, which takes care of individuals and corporations in over 30 states. We have a team of just about 20 folks who do this, and it's greatest privilege of my life. It is an opportunity to realize a dream and a vision that I first started writing about when I was 21 years old. And what I tell my patients when I get to sit down with them is I have the easiest job in the world, and that is to love and care for you. So this, Jonathan. I'm a lover at heart. I certainly can fight with the best of them if and as and when I need to. But my preference, my default mode is to love and care for somebody. I find that it fills me in a meaningful and demonstrative way. My entrepreneurial gifts had me start this business. Started the business actually over 10 years ago. I've been open serving people since March of 2017. So, 9 years of operations. And, I am very lucky because we continue to grow this. We continue to serve more people. And this is no longer about me and 100% about we.
Yeah. You said love and care are at the heart of your practice. If I were to start as a new member of Shift, what would my
Yeah.
experience be different than if I just went to my local GP for annual physical and my first appointment?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about my sales and marketing team being so upset with how I probably laid that out, right? The technical aspects of Shift are that we're somewhere around medicine 3.0. So we're a concierge medical practice or a membership medical practice where we provide your primary care services and do executive care for individuals and organizations. You pay us a flat fee for the care we provide. You have access to our cell phones, your direct physician cell phone. You have a team of dietitians, physical therapists, and a care team that is helping assess who you are and where you're at with the physician at the top. We think of our physician basically as your senior vice president of health. You are the CEO of your life, and we're your senior vice president. You are setting the vision for what you want to accomplish, and our job is to understand you, right? The complete version of you, the content of what's going inside, head to toe, and the context of what's happening around you. And that allows us to understand who you are and where you're at. We need to go back and understand who you were, right? And where you were at and what led you to here in order for us to support you and be your Sherpa along that journey. So we take a very active and engaged approach for how we think about the care. This is not simply reactive medicine that creates access points for people, but it is about collaborative building of who you are as a human to have the longevity and, more importantly, the vitality. So some people call it the lifespan and health span, but we want you to live well.
So that's a through line in your work. Before Shift, you were a Blackhawks team physician through 3 Stanley Cup seasons. And these locker rooms are just full of elite performers, just operating at the edge of their capacity. And you described yourself in a different context, as a personal growth athlete, always stretching yourself physically, intellectually, emotionally. What do you learn in those environments about the relationship between the physical optimization and the way that people think that you bring back to your civilian patients?
Civilian patients, I love that. So here's what I'm gonna say. Everything comes with a trade. It is watching somebody be in the pursuit of is amazing. And Jonathan, you see this all the time with the people that you coach when they get untangled and then they begin to figure out, right, what they're going after and watching them not just get started, but accelerate. And that acceleration is awesome. And then where the accomplishment, whether it gets succeeds or not, they've changed, right? Because they have a pattern of how to do that. So as it pertains to my patients, there are some basic what we call habit stacks that you just have to have in order to understand how to take care of this thing so that it can perform for what it means. And then or for whatever the goal is. And then for me, more importantly, one of the things that I think about all the time is this trade. Well, if I'm gonna go for something this high or this, I'm gonna go after some elite goal, you've got to acknowledge that oftentimes that is not about health, right? That's all about psychology. It's all about a personal want within. That is immeasurable, right? That is immeasurable for a human soul. And so we don't have great measurement tools yet for a human soul, but we do have great measurements and metrics for a human being and what their health looks like. So there are dichotomies there. They don't always line up.
So I'm smiling as you're saying this. You talk about measurements for a human soul. Uh, I mean, I that's my business. Do you have a life of full engagement? And as a doctor, as an MBA, as someone who's trained to use analytical logic to measure and optimize and improve, do you feel yourself shying away from measurements of joy and meaning and ease of life?
For
How do you approach
myself
that
or
sort of
for
thing?
patients or what?
Uh, let's for your patients professionally.
Well, it's so interesting. This is such a good question, and I would, gosh, I would really, I think that this is a through line for other physicians as well to consider and talk through. So, I am grateful for my medical degree because it made an intuitive, emotional, creative, double down on logic, process, algorithm, rational thinking. And it was the greatest gift I could have because it forced me to spend years on weaknesses, and that what that allowed me to do was not shy away from the weakness, but acknowledge where that is. And why I'm talking about that is when we talk about these things for health, look, life is not about eating alfalfa sprouts, never having a glass of wine, getting your 8 hours of sleep. And, it's not about that, right? It's about what I believe, and what I observe is life is about how well you've lived it in your own experience, not anybody else's. And so at the end of the day, if you are not congruent with who you are and what you want as a human, all of the health metrics don't really matter. So to me, remorse and regret are concepts and ideas that I hold clearly, where most people, because of how the brain works, are trading their longevity and their vitality based on passive, unconscious decisions from how they were, let's call it, nurtured, and the environments they were in their life that take away from their health. So all I want to do is shine a light on a blind spot or an illogical pattern or sequence that they have about why they can or can't do something, which allows them then to find pattern change. So we're in the same business. I just have greater data points, that are, what I would say, irrefutable from a medical standpoint and provide a lot more immediate fear
Yeah,
than
sure.
the existential personal growth perspective.
Yeah, but I like what you said. Like, if you want a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. If you want a piece of cake, have a piece of cake. It's all about balance and service of your long term goals. When my son was 7 years old, we had out of town guests, and they were about to leave the next day. He was 7 years old. It was like 10:30. He was still hanging out with this boy his age, and he had school the next day. And I said, it's 10:30. It's time for bed. Are you going to go to sleep now and have a great day tomorrow, or are you going to stay up with your friend and be tired and cranky? And he said, I'm going to be really tired and cranky tomorrow. Like, he was very clear on what was important to him, and it was not getting a full night's sleep. And I respect that decision. There's a
That's
time and a
right.
place. But go ahead.
I think there's something really important here, which is, who are the people in your life that you can lean on to help ask you these questions? What is the pattern that you have to ask yourself and reflect on these questions? Life and our calendars get remarkably busy. And that is the world we live in, our connected devices. I have four of them around me right now. There are so many inputs. And we can take moments, right? You can meditate for a moment, you can get some time, but how many of us step back and actually reflect to give ourselves the chance, you know, to see the field as opposed to just being, you know, in the middle of the plays?
Well, let's talk about support and that balance and the people around us who help prevent us from getting out of balance, going over the edge. Tell me about the Distillate, your nonprofit to reduce burnout in healthcare workers, educators, caregivers.
Yeah. So, look, the distillate was born, out of the pandemic window in 2021, 2022, where, I just saw a lot of people giving, right? I mean, certainly our universe, our world was a different world, and saw a lot of people being really exhausted. Um, and the distillate was basically, me starting with some of my own money to just say, like, if not now, then when? And if not who? If not me, then who? And it was about the idea that there's a tremendous amount of burnout and there is disproportionate remuneration for people who are giving of their time in service to have relational connectedness to help somebody else be better. Um, and so we were seeing less, we're seeing greater teacher burnout. We're seeing greater nurse burnout. We're seeing caregivers be exhausted and leave. And so I was very concerned about, what did our future look like? And of course, you start doing a little bit of research on it. You start asking questions, and your biases are confirmed because, right, that's human nature. But I wanted to do something. I didn't want to make it everything. I didn't want to make it my next thing, but it was a place that I could continue to explore on how to help others. It is today. We are in a phase where we're actively working to build a tool that is AI based with real life human interaction. So with interviewees to help pair people with burnout in the moment to um, constructively resourceful assets or people. So think of warm handoffs. So when somebody is burnt out right now, there is an EAP they can go to. There's often somewhere they can reach out to get a hotline and number or something, but those resources, they suck.
Can you just
So
define EAP for a minute?
employee assistance program.
License
So
program.
when somebody is really in trouble or feels like they're starting to drown, getting access to help and support is extremely difficult. And to get a number, to get a website that gives you not what you need is
Yeah.
another weight, right? It's exhausting. And so we want to increase the resourceful connection for each person that's in that window.
You think it says about the healthcare system, or maybe just the individuals who are attracted to it, that people who dedicate their lives to serving and supporting others are at such high risk of burnout?
Well, I mean, this is not just in healthcare. It's in that, I mean, we see this with teachers who we're helping as well, and
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
certainly in frontline care. It's all frontline care workers, but in healthcare, it's a very interesting thing about healthcare is the traditional healthcare system. Is very very transactional. Historically, it was set up as a problem solution system. Now, it's not universal. I'm not trying to say every and all, but the vast majority is all about transaction. And so that's volume, right? And the demand is there is so much more demand than there is supply that we are always asking somebody, right, to do just one more just for another person. And that is damaging their souls. It's killing them because it's pulling from a place here. It's not pulling from a place here. It's not smarter to do that, right? You're not getting paid more, right? And the relative dollar per hour on yield for you is not great, but it's pulling here. And these people end up just feeling so exhausted and done.
Yeah. I wonder if there's also just a fundamental values misalignment that, you said you found a shift on, from a space of love and care. But when all of your training is to see people often at the worst, hardest time of their life and to see them as a problem to be solved, there's a certain denial of humanity and the not allowing yourself to have that human connection, not allowing yourself to cry. I imagine that creates a lot of dissonance, and from that dissonance and misalignment, a lot of burnout too.
Well, I think that that's a coping strategy. I wouldn't connect it. I mean, certainly the system setup, it is impactful there. But one of the beauties of the best caregivers, right, of the best healthcare workers, are that they feel in those moments. They identify. But if you've been in that, you know that that's unsustainable. You have to go to sleep and wake up the next day. You have errands to run. You have a family, right, that requires whatever. You have a car tire that needs to be fixed. And so, this thing called life isn't set up that way. And those people who are the frontline folks are not making that much money. And it's incredibly taxing on them.
Yeah, yeah, and not enough support. Well, until they hear about the distillate. All right, what have you redesigned in your business and your leadership or your environment just to better fit the way that you think, to fit your intensity, to fit this combination of powerful analytical mind and a powerful heart?
It's a good question. I have some reflexive answers. I would love to think about that one as well and probably give it a little bit more thought. What I've come to what I've come to sort of do, right, is I spend time with a few people who know me intimately well and can understand exactly who I am. I really struggle with this idea of understanding my impact as the CEO and founder of the organization. If I do what's sort of called a drive by, where I go to somebody and just have a conversation with them, it still to this day frustrates me that, you know, the weight of that conversation far exceeds the weight of all the other things. The CEO just came by and he talked to me about this. I got to handle this, right? And that's my own blind spot. I mean, that probably goes back to the earlier question where I just have to own the gravity of that. What I also realize is that if I want this to be something bigger than my own ego of founding and creating and blah blah blah, it can't all go through me. So I have to let that go. I have to acknowledge how to set up the right standards, the right communication, build the right relationships. So it's not just about what my needs are, but it's what our shared needs are as a diet or a triad of a team, right, going to do stuff. And as we begin to expand beyond the four walls of our first location, that is ever more apparent. That is super apparent right now for us to
Yeah.
get good at.
Tell me about that team. Who do you surround yourself with? And do you feel that your team amplifies your strengths? Do they rein you in? Do they make you better?
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, um, I have an amazing COO that I work alongside with. We've had a partnership for almost 15 years. He came into my first business and helped me. I will tell this story. He came into the first business that I had, and he looked at our financials and started spending time digging in. And I told him how healthy of a business we had, and this, that, and the next. A very classic young entrepreneur. And he said, "Look, you're like the runner who smokes and eats hamburgers every day." He's like, "You're the guy who's, smoking and telling me he's doing a great job because he's running." He's like, "There are a lot of things that just aren't healthy about this." And that was very insightful, gave me religion. So Mark and I work hand in hand, and the trust we have for one another because of how relationally connected we are enables us to know that it's not about either one being super strong or super perfect, but an acknowledgement of like, great, there's a great tether. Here are your skills. Here's what you can do. Here are my skills. Here's what I can do. How are we doing? Where do I need your help? Vice versa. Where do we have gaps? So it's great teamwork. And that teamwork is ridiculously important, right? In order to understand that, in order to grow.
And I hear just underpinning that answer is that same love and care just permeates the organization, seeing not just your patients, but your the people you work with as human beings.
Yeah, and I think I want to add to that though. I think
Yeah.
there's a very important distinction here. When we talk about love and care, and I think about that all the time. Um, we're a culture, we're a truth culture, and love and care doesn't mean that you are afraid to share meaningful truth. So sometimes I think people think love and care means it's aspirational, it's kind. Sometimes you have to wait, certainly, to deliver a message, but sometimes you have to deliver the hard messages, and that doesn't just go that's not just me, to somebody else, but that is vice versa, right back at me.
Well, and whether it's someone on your team, whether it's a patient, whether it's your child, can you deliver that hard truth and have them feel that you love them at the same time? That's the
Hmm.
that's a challenge. All right, what are you still figuring out around how you communicate and collaborate with others?
I mean, what am I not still figuring out? Every certainty becomes uncertain in a different situation. So, what I am currently working on and I'm still figuring out is what nourishes me and what depletes me from an energetic perspective, especially as I begin to age. How do I think about those elements? That's one piece of it. The other one that I think is incredibly important is how do I communicate in a way that others receive the message as I intended it to be delivered. So each human being sometimes needs a different mode of delivery, and I am a be brief, be bold, and be gone. So let me give you the basics and go from there. And that does not work for some people.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me more about what drains your energy that you wish you could give up this new year.
I don't know if it's anything about giving up. I think it's about awareness and understanding. So can I understand it even more? Can I see what this is and can I get the space to process it? I think for me, they are learning moments, and some of them are learning about others. Some of them are learning about myself, and some of them are learning about the collective.
Yeah. What's an activity that nourishes you, energizes you, makes you feel more fully alive that you wish you had more of this new year?
Uh, um, Sleep continues to be the one that I um, no longer shortchange it like I used to. So sleep is one that I've gotten very good religion on. I'm an active member of the sleep community, metaphorically speaking. But I think the other one for me is just this distance from activity and people. So a great night's sleep where I wake up without an alarm, grabbing a coffee and allowing my brain the space to go where it wants, my mind, giving it that freedom to roam is just as much of a workout for me as getting a physical one. So I appreciate that now way more than I did years ago. I don't always force the activities in a strict time bound routine.
Yeah. You know, I was also just having a conversation about there's 6 different kinds of fatigue. There's a physical fatigue, but there's mental fatigue, there's emotional fatigue. There could be creative fatigue. There's all these different ways of all these different dimensions of depletion. And then how do you recover for the right one? Is that something that you experience, and is it something that you work on in yourself and with your patients?
All of it, yes. I mean, and so you say, how do I recover for the right one? I think, well, I mean, it's not as though one happens in isolation. They're all happening, they're all interwoven, and it's not like it's a beautiful braid, right? Sometimes it's these janky knots. And so how do you understand that and see where it's at? I mean, first and foremost, it requires observation, it requires time. So, what are the input measures or inputs and process measures that you're paying attention to? And to me, that's a challenge. It just takes time to pay attention to that. And so um tracking and I say passive with active tracking can't be just a watch or a ring or something like that. There has to be some active engagement with it. Many people are hyper focused on the details of that data as opposed to the qualitative perspectives of that data. And so, what do I mean by that? If your watch told you you got 7 hours of sleep and 3 hours of it was REM and only 45 minutes was deep, and your HRV is two, like, oh my God, that means something. It doesn't all mean anything yet, right? Some of it might have value, but some of it might be noise. And what you're looking for are trends and directions. So before you take something that's quantitative, you really want to understand the qualitative perspective to understand consistency of self declared range. Because if you don't have an awareness, you can't tell. So looking at a number and giving it the status, right, or significance that we are giving it is not always fair and reasonable. So I tell patients all the time, right? I take care of people, not numbers. Numbers are super important to help us understand, but they are not necessarily truth like it is in basic algebra.
Yeah. All right. One of my favorite things to hear from people is their vision for the future. We're having this conversation May 22nd, 2026. If we were talking exactly 1 year from now, May 22nd, 2027, and you have just crushed it in every aspect of career and finances and all of your most important relationships and health and friends and fitness and spirituality, just everything that matters to you. Looking back, what made this such a phenomenal year?
One, I'm going to challenge you. I sort of think that is that notion. While I believe it and I aspire to some of that, I sometimes think that that's a little bit misleading.
Tell me about it.
So I think, you know, what does it look like if I crushed everything in my life and all my wishes and dreams came true? Well, like, that implies that maybe your wishes and dreams are not coming true in this current moment. And that, I think it requires some reflection. I think for me, it's, um, am I present to what life is putting in front of me? Am I meeting the call and demands of what is asked of me? And then am I aware of who I am and what I need? And those needs are constantly changing. So, not to be evasive of the question, I have plenty of goals and I have plenty of wants. And I also know that I have no idea nor control over what tomorrow brings. And so for me, it's for me, it is about the consistency of how many days, how many moments can I be here now? Can I be in the present? Can I be fully engaged? And am I doing the activities that allow me to increase that presence and engagement?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an excellent
So
answer.
yeah, I mean, I could tell you goals.
Let me read back to you what I wrote down, what I heard. It's May 22nd, 2027, and I declare the possibility that I am fully alive and engaged in this moment, this one. I'm present to what life is presenting me. I'm aware of what I need and who I am. I'm being of service to my highest ability, a responsible steward of my gifts.
That's
What do you
it.
think? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. What do you think is something that might be in the way, stopping you from living that every day?
Well, I think I'm learning about ego, space, and confrontation. I still really struggle with, I'm going to use the word how to fight, how to have positive, collaborative confrontation, because my default pattern, I think like many others, is to prove that I'm right. And that can be triggering, and how to accept difference in a situation and recognize that it may not be in the moment where the solution will be had or be found, but that time is also a gift to give myself. And so I feel a lot of time pressure, and so sometimes I want things resolved, I want them answered, or I want people and systems to be aligned based on my timing.
Yeah. Yeah. For what it's worth, my answers to that question, how to fight in the way that you want to fight, is to frame with heart and love and care so that the person who is, could you take responsibility for the way that someone receives what you're giving them? To frame it with heart and love and care so they actually see it through this frame. Can you accept differences without judgment? I'm 6'3". It's not bragging. It's just an observable fact. You're an incredible. And then maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. But there's nothing arrogant about saying what my height is. And there's nothing arrogant about you acknowledging that in certain ways you have a depth of knowledge and skill and expertise that's just several standard deviations above the norm. And then to act from purpose and values. That when we are fighting, it's not for our egos, but it's for something that matters. What do you think?
Well, I think on that notion though, you do have to pay attention to let me rephrase. I have to pay attention to what gets triggered, because I think ego gets in the way. I think, e- learning new patterns has been remarkably reinforcing. I don't have the same level of fights or insecurities or uncertainties as I did 5 years ago, and I won't in the next 5 years. But I can still feel certain doors trying to reopen about this, that, or the next. Well, do you see me? Do you understand me? If you understood me, then you would align with. It's like all of these kinds of what I think are ego needy perspectives.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's switch roles for a minute. Why don't you be the question asker? I'll be the question answerer. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me?
Jonathan, what are two things you're working on right now?
So I'm working on two things that I'm really excited about. Uh, the first is a few days before this conversation is going to be published. I am launching a private WhatsApp community for intense pattern speaking entrepreneurs, a place to find your neurokin, people with whom you feel a neurological kinship, where you can just be yourself unmasked, ask questions, share experience, no translation necessary, inspiring to be inspired. That group's going to be launching this week. I've been working on it for months. The other big thing that I'm working on, and this podcast is a part of it, is to start a movement to inspire people to design their environments, their strategies, their relationships to actually fit the way that they think, not just to take the received wisdom, the plain book, the playbook, whether it's yours, mine, anyone else's, to take that as data point, but then to try it on, see if it fits, to notice the parts of their lives that just seem like they weren't designed for you to thrive. And then just with a little bit of intention to change it, to tweak it so that it's energizing instead of depleting. Those are the two big things I'm working on right now.
So, can I ask probably a little bit of a leading question?
Yeah.
But for your listeners, as they probably know, you're a little bit of an introvert.
Yeah.
And
A little bit.
building anything requires a high amount of extroversion, particularly with what you're going after. And so, as a close friend, I've observed you being busier and more frenetic than you've been in maybe 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah. I appreciate that question because, yeah, I felt stretched thin the last couple of months as I've been building this. And I have felt a just deep heart, purpose centered desire to build this thing. And I've been scheduling, in addition to my normal work, 5, 6, 30 to 60-minute calls a day. And that's just exhausting for me. That's a lot more than is sustainable. And right now, I'm at the we're having this conversation literally 2 hours before I'm about to say that season of life has ended, and I'm ready to start slowing things down, limiting my calls to 2 or 3 a day instead of what I've been doing the pace from the last few months. There's a season for everything. There's a season to power through. There is a season to make things happen and get things done, especially for things that you really care about. Maybe this is a more intellectual response than you wanted, and pull me back if it is. But we feel overwhelmed when our level of challenge is significantly higher than our level of skill and support. And in the opposite, we feel bored and disengaged when our level of skill and support is much higher than our level of challenge. Flow is when that level of skill and support and challenge are evenly matched. And the last couple of months I've allowed myself to get out of balance. And starting this long Memorial Day weekend is when I'm starting to get back into balance. I'm actually spending 4 days in Amish country, leaving in a couple hours, totally unplugged. No internet, no cell service, just nothing but human connection and nature, plus
So,
some yoga and meditation. So I'm starting a period of recalibration.
yeah. So what I hear is I think a topic that, probably is consistent with what both of us are working on, which is nothing's ever about an equilibrium and always sticking there, right? In balance. You're not always going to be in flow, but how can you challenge yourself above and beyond without breaking, right? And then getting back down so that you can recover, so that you can so how do you oscillate, right? And almost a sinusoidal type of way so that you can grow, right? Recover, repair.
Yeah, champions know when to recover. And when we push, whether it's physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, anything else, that's when we overextend ourselves. We get out of
So,
balance. We go into burnout. And just to notice that, and then to slow down. And the things that I do, I go back to yoga and meditation, and then deep human connection.
so what if somebody feels like they've never broken? What do you tell them? Like, you push, you push, you push, but in their minds, right? They've never had a moment where they feel like they've totally collapsed, they've physically hurt themselves, whatever it is. So they don't know where that upper bound is. How would you coach them?
So first of all, that sounds fantastic. Like wonderful. If you've never met your edge, it's pretty exciting to be in that space of uh, what's the word? Is it hypomanic space? Not full blown mania, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you just feel like everything's alive and you're like right at the edge. Like what a gift to be able to live in that space. I guess what I would ask is start with the people who love and care about you most. What are they saying? Be open to their perspective. Do they see something that you don't? And regardless of that, the people around you who have different gifts than you, they have different levels of energy and stamina. They might think, "Oh my gosh, Ari, what you do, I could never do that." And that's an entirely accurate statement. I could never do what you do. But that doesn't mean that you can't do what you do. But there's parts of our body that know the answers to these questions: our throat, our heart, our gut. And if you could get into a relaxed, receptive state, close your eyes, ground yourself, feel your physical connection to the earth, your feet on the ground, your butt in your chair, your arms in your lap. Take a couple full breaths, deeper than usual, but relaxed, not forced. Tune into these parts of your body that know. And simply ask yourself, is this too much? Is this sustainable? Would I feel more alive if I did more? Would I feel more alive if I did less? And notice, do you feel an excitement, an electricity when you answer those questions? Do you feel a contraction, a withdrawal when you answer those questions? And that's your answer. This is not something you could think yourself to. It's only something you could feel yourself towards.
Great response. Thank you. You wish your community knew about you that nobody's asked you before.
What is something I wish my community knew about me? I think I'm a pretty open book, but something that I think my friends know about me, somewhat more tangential, somewhat more distant relationships don't, is I have what I think I would describe as a spiky empathy. On the one hand, I care very deeply about people. When I see people, and I have I have a very acute sense, especially of other people's suffering. I find the bruised and broken parts of people beautiful and fascinating, and I want to learn more and I want to help. At the same time, I'm sometimes perceived as more head than heart, and the heart's always very alive. It's very active. It's very attuned. But that's been an area of challenge and growth for me, is being able to express that, especially when it's in a less casual or more crowded session. I'm a one-on-one person. It's very hard for me to do this in groups. So I think that would be the first thing. Just knowing that as much as I often lead with my head, my heart's what powers everything.
Great answer. And the last one is, I would say is, does your community know how much you love to dance? So, to the community at large, here's the thing, right? What's so interesting about this head and heart neurokin is that you get the right music on for Jonathan, and there's no head involved. It's all heart and soul.
Yeah. No, I love what's called ecstatic dance. Mostly eyes closed, not in relation with the people around me, but not necessarily even dancing with another person. Just full bodily presence and joy. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
I wanna offer you a thought of consideration for your neurokin because everybody might have different forms of this. But I went to a wedding a couple of years ago where they gave out headphones,
Yeah.
there were just there were a couple of different channels that you picked or songs, and everybody was dancing, and so it was not loud and vibrant, right? It was not loud, but it was incredibly vibrant because people could find their kind of
Yeah.
music, and it was just so interesting because people were still engaging with one another just to their own beats.
I'm generally not a party person, but the again I like one-on-one, but the one of the best parties I've ever been to was a unicorn dance party. We all got unicorn onesies. That's a story for another day. And we had these headphones. So there were like three channels and you could dance, everyone was doing it. But if you also just wanted to take a break and have a quiet conversation, you just took your headphones off and everyone else is doing their thing, but you could just have a quiet conversation. And what a gift for someone like me. Ari, what's something that you wish people listening knew about you or your company?
I think we're the best in the business at caring for people, understanding the content and context of what's going on, helping them build their health, and then connecting them to the resources that are needed. I really think we have an exceptional group of people that do this job beyond my wildest imagination.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with people listening today? Any last words of wisdom?
No, just a debt of gratitude to you. Thank you for having me.
been a gift. How should people get in touch with you, learn about you, follow your work?
They can learn about us through shiftlife.com. So www.shiftlife, SHIFT.
Dr. Ari Levy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your heart, your story. I see you, Ari, and you are beautiful.
Thanks, Jonathan. It was great to be here.
Thanks for listening to The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur. If today's conversation resonated, especially if you are a founder who has built something meaningful but senses that the structure around you no longer fully fits how your mind works, I would love to hear from you at untangled-coaching.com. Don't forget the dash. If this episode was valuable, the best thing you could do is to share it with one founder who needs to hear this message. That's how the show grows, one person at a time. Until next time, may your work ahead fit you better than anything you've ever built before. And if today's conversation felt like it was speaking directly to you, probably was. I'd love for you to reach out.